There's a strange paradox in human desire. We often want those who are unavailable, distant, uninterested, or beyond reach more intensely than those who stand right in front of us. It is not simply romantic preference. It is something deeper, wired into emotion, biology, memory, ego, and subconscious instinct. When someone cannot be fully obtained, the mind begins to assign extraordinary meaning to their presence. Their silence becomes mysterious. Their indifference becomes intriguing. Their distance becomes proof of their value. We do not just desire them, we idealize them. We place them at the center of our internal universe and convince ourselves that our life would somehow become complete if only they finally turn toward us. When someone is hard to get, the brain interprets it as scarcity. Scarcity activates pursuit. This response is evolutionary. For thousands of years, anything rare was automatically valuable. Rare food sources, rare animals, rare materials, rare opportunities. The primitive brain learned that rare things must be chased, fought for, sacrificed for. That instinct did not disappear. Now, instead of rare fruit, it pursues rare affection. Instead of scarce resources, it pursues scarce attention. So when someone withdraws, delays, hesitates, or remains emotionally unavailable, the desire intensifies, not because that person is objectively better, but because the brain reacts to scarcity like a survival opportunity. The unavailable person becomes a symbolic prize. But attraction to the unattainable does not begin in adulthood. It begins in childhood. People who grew up working hard to receive love often develop a conditioned pattern. Love equals effort. Love equals uncertainty. Love equals earning. If affection came rarely, unpredictably, or inconsistently, the nervous system learned that desire must hurt. That closeness is fragile. That attachment is unstable. And so, in adulthood, emotional unpredictability feels familiar. It feels like home. What is stable, sincere, available, transparent may feel too calm, too easy, too unexciting. Many people confuse emotional stability with boredom because their nervous system was trained to chase affection, not receive it. When someone cannot be obtained, they become a canvas for imagination. We fill the unknown with ideal qualities. The less we know, the more space fantasy has to expand. This is why unrequited desire feels so intense. The person is not just who they are, they become who we want them to be. Their absence becomes more powerful than their presence ever was. Their silence becomes louder than their voice. We begin to assign meaning to meaningless signals. Delayed messages become emotional depth. Mixed signals become vulnerability. Inconsistency becomes complexity. The unavailable person becomes perfect because reality cannot interrupt fantasy. They remain unspoiled by truth. Sometimes we want the unreachable because they validate our sense of inadequacy. Subconsciously, many people choose people who will not choose them back. It confirms a familiar internal belief. I am not enough. That belief feels painful, but it is familiar. The familiar becomes comfortable, even when it hurts. When someone finally reciprocates, they threaten that internal narrative. If they choose us genuinely, then we must confront the possibility that we are worthy, and worthiness is frightening. Worthiness requires responsibility. Worthiness challenges identity. Worthiness contradicts years of self-perception. Another reason we desire the unattainable is because the pursuit becomes a story. It becomes emotional drama, personal mythology, psychological adventure. We create scenes in our mind, imagine outcomes, parallel futures. The desire becomes cinematic. Pain becomes meaningful. Heartache becomes romantic. Many people fall in love with the longing itself, not with the actual person. They fall in love with anticipation, projection, and what-if versions of reality. They fall in love with who they believe they could be if they finally received the unattainable person's love. There's also ego. Being chosen by someone who does not give affection easily feels like proof of worth. It creates the illusion. If this person chooses me, then I must be exceptional. So often, we're not drawn to the person themselves, but to the validation attached to their acceptance. Uncertainty triggers stronger dopamine than stable affection. The anticipation of reward becomes more stimulating than receiving it, which is why inconsistent affection feels addictive. Not because the person is better, but because emotional unpredictability activates biochemical intensity. The unavailable person becomes a stimulant, not a source of connection. The irony is that if such a person suddenly becomes emotionally open, the attraction often fades. Not because we stop liking them, but because the fantasy dissolves. Once the unknown becomes known, the pursuit loses its intensity. What people interpret as loss of love is usually loss of idealization. They were never attached to the person, they were attached to longing. Distance allows projection. We imagine that if they finally stayed, we would feel complete, confident, valuable. But no partner can transform us into who we want to be. Fulfillment does not come from being chosen. It comes from no longer needing external validation to feel significant. Impossibility feels safe. If a real relationship never begins, it never fails. If someone never enters our life fully, they cannot disappoint us. Emotional distance allows control. Closeness requires vulnerability. The fear is not rejection. It is being seen, known, and expected to reciprocate. Sometimes pursuing the unavailable becomes self-punishment. People repeat emotional patterns that once hurt them, hoping for a different ending. But repetition only deepens the original wound. Often we don't want the actual person, we want the identity we imagine next to them. They become a symbol, not a partner. A psychological destination rather than someone real. The tragedy is not that they don't choose us. It is that we abandon ourselves, spending emotional energy on someone who never participates. Real change happens only when attraction shifts toward someone available, because intimacy is not built on longing, but on presence and reciprocity. Once emotional independence develops, longing loses its appeal. Validation is no longer currency. Distance stops being exciting. Real closeness, steady and responsive, becomes more meaningful than intensity built on uncertainty. In the end, we often desire unavailable people because they allow us to avoid transformation. Thanks for watching.